They erased me from every family photo, so I erased myself from their lives. But when the house went up for sale, I came back, not to fight, to end it all quietly. The call came at 4:52 p.m. Not late enough to be ignored. Not early enough to pretend it didn't shake the day loose. Hey, just letting you know we're selling the house. Thought you'd want to know. If you even care. That was all. No hi. No have you been. No warmth in the voice. Just that clipped tone my sister mastered years ago, the tone that says, this isn't really your place anymore, but I'm offering you the illusion of it so I can say I did. I stood in my apartment for a few minutes after the call ended. Not moving. Not thinking. Just standing. Because it wasn't just a house. It was the house. The one Dad built with his bare hands in 1986. The one he swore we'd never leave. The one I practically rebuilt after the roof collapsed that spring. Every nail I hammered. Every window I scraped clean. And now it was on the market. Without a single word until it was already done. They'd always been good at that. Not excluding me with anger, excluding me with silence. Leaving my name off the group texts. Forgetting to loop me in. Erasing, not rejecting. They were quiet professionals at erasure. I packed that night. No plan. Just muscle memory. A bag. Keys. A jacket that still smelled faintly of pine from those long nights out back on the deck, pretending everything was fine. The next morning, I hit the road before sunrise. No one knew I was coming. No one cared. I passed mile markers that used to mean something, places we stopped for gas, for snacks, for memories that only I seemed to carry. Now they looked like artifacts from a life I must have imagined. By the time I turned onto Sycamore Lane, the sky had turned the color of steel. Quiet. Flat. Like the road was holding its breath. And there it was. Still standing. Same crooked mailbox. Same cracked stone path. But something was off. The porch light was off. Always on growing up. A quiet promise that someone was waiting inside. But not now. I parked a few feet away. Not in the driveway. That felt presumptuous. There were cars already there, familiar makes, familiar plates. I recognized Aaron's dusty Honda. Kate's new SUV. They were home. And I was a stranger in the street. I stepped up to the door. No one opened it. Not even after I knocked once. Twice. Eventually, I just turned the knob and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Not of food or candles or warmth. Just dust. Furniture polish. Stale air and something colder. I took a step forward and heard laughter. Not from joy. From the back of the house. That polite, brittle kind people use when they know you're near but haven't decided if you're welcome. And then I saw them, clustered around the kitchen island, sipping wine. My brother glanced over. Lifted his glass. Well, look who showed up. And just like that, I was 13 again. Too tall, too quiet, and already out of place in my own home. They didn't stop talking when I walked in. That was the first sign. In normal homes, people pause. They greet you. Shift their posture. Make room. But not here. They just adjusted the volume, as if I was background noise that didn't require acknowledgement. The kitchen looked different. Sleeker. Polished. Granite counters instead of Dad's old butcher block island. Stainless steel fridge where Mom's magnet-covered relic used to stand. But the people inside? They hadn't changed. If anything, they'd calcified. Aaron leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, sipping something too dark to be casual. Kate sat on the counter like she always did, one leg swinging, face tilted at a performative angle, lips curled like she was auditioning for sympathy. They were talking about the living room curtains. Not the memories. Not the holidays. Not Dad. Just curtains. I didn't speak. Just stood near the entryway like a coat no one wanted to claim. My sister finally looked up, then glanced back at Aaron. Well, she said, tone syrupy with judgment, he made it. I nodded once. No smile. Kate slid off the counter. Walked toward me with a kind of practiced elegance that came from years of pretending she was someone's favorite. You came after all. I wasn't invited. She laughed softly, like that was a punchline instead of a wound. You didn't need an invitation. It's family. That word hit different now. Family. It used to mean something. Safety. Belonging. Now it sounded more like a reminder that I was being tolerated, not included. I stepped into the living room while they returned to their glasses and half-spoken jokes. And that's when I saw it. The photo wall. Changed. Our family photos used to line it. Dad with his arm around all three of us. Camping trips. Christmas mornings. Graduation. My first house key. No? Only Aaron's wedding. Kate's baby shower. Mom's birthday party from last year. Nothing of me. Not a trace. I stood there longer than I should have, eyes scanning each frame like a ghost searching for proof of its past. There was one photo near the end of the hallway, smaller, tucked behind a doorframe. One of us as kids, me in the middle, but I'd been folded out of the frame. Literally, the crease cut right through my shoulder. I wasn't even fully visible. It would have been funny if it didn't sting. I stepped into the den, the same room where Dad and I rewired the outlets after the fire. The same room where he gave me his watch before the funeral. The one room I thought they hadn't touched. But even that had been rearranged. Lena's old toys gone. The bookshelf dismantled. The desk we built from scratch replaced with something from a catalog. Aaron passed by behind me. Didn't know you'd be so sentimental. I didn't answer. Because I knew now. This wasn't my house anymore. And maybe it never really was. The dining room table was covered in sticky notes. Not family photos. Not keepsakes. Just yellow squares and price tags, like a second-hand shop waiting to open. Kate was holding a Sharpie and scribbling numbers on the backs of things. A vase. A lamp. A clock I once fixed when it stopped ticking after Dad's heart surgery. That one's chipped, she said to no one in particular, flipping over the lamp base. Should knock 20 off. Aaron stood beside her, holding a spreadsheet. He wasn't helping, just pointing. The toolbox goes with the garage lot, he muttered. And the records. I guess those can go to the neighbor's kid. The records. My records. My father's records. The ones we spent a whole summer cleaning together. Turntables spinning Otis Redding on Sunday afternoons while the rest of them were out pretending not to be part of this family. I stepped toward the table. The notes weren't random. They were a list. An inventory. What is this? I asked, voice flat. Kate didn't even look up. We're cataloging. Clarine wants it all done before next week's open house. Clarine. Their realtor. Not a family member. Not a friend. Just someone efficient. So you're just selling it all? It's a house, not a museum, Aaron said behind me. That was it. The final cut. The house we grew up in. The house we cried in. Fixed in. Broke in. Where Dad took his last breath and Mom pretended not to notice. Now it was just square footage. Taxable space. A sellable asset. I ran my hand along the edge of the table. The one Dad and I sanded down the winter Mom wanted everything to feel lighter. There was still a notch in the corner from where Lena had dropped her backpack too hard that one Thanksgiving. They had tagged it with a note. Rustic. Needs refinishing. I didn't touch it. Didn't tear the note. Didn't yell. I just stood there. Like a wall fixture. They went on talking. About buyers. About market trends. About which cousin deserved what. But no one asked me. No one said, "Do you want this?" Or "You helped build that." Because to them, I'd already left. I'd made the mistake of living quietly, not visiting enough, not arguing enough. And silence, in this house, was treated like surrender. Lena walked in a few minutes later. No one noticed. She stood beside me, hands in her coat pockets, her eyes scanning the table like it was a crime scene. "You all right?" she asked. I nodded. Because I was. Not okay, but clear. I didn't need to fight anymore. I just needed to see it, one last time. To see what they were so willing to throw away. And remember it exactly as it was. I found the missing photo in the guest room closet. Tucked behind a box labeled seasonal decor, buried under old table runners and a cracked ceramic angel that used to sit above the fireplace. It was the original. The full version. All 5 of us standing in front of the house. I was in the center, arms around Lena and Kate. Dad was behind us, squinting into the sun. Mom's smile was wide but empty, the kind she wore for holiday cards, not memories. And there I was. Whole. Present. Real. The version they'd cropped out and quietly replaced with a tighter frame. A cleaner narrative. No one had said they removed it. No one had to. In this family, deletion never needed discussion. It just happened. Quietly. Without fuss. Like someone sweeping crumbs under a rug and pretending they were never there. I carried the frame downstairs. Held it in my hands as I walked into the living room. Aaron was boxing up books, Dad's old technical manuals, most of which he couldn't read. Kate was arguing over whether the rug counted as original or inherited. I said nothing, just held the photo up and waited. Kate turned first. She blinked, paused. Then her mouth twisted into that careful smile people use when they've been caught, but don't want to admit it. "Oh, that," she said. "We didn't think it matched the others anymore." "Didn't match?" I repeated. Aaron looked up, frowned. "You found that?" It wasn't intentional. But even he didn't believe that. Because we both remembered the day that photo was taken. Dad had asked me to set the timer on the camera. I had propped it on a stepladder with a shoebox. He insisted we all wear blue, and Mom had rolled her eyes but complied. We waited for the light to blink red. We smiled. We stood together. It was the last photo we ever took as a full family, and now it was buried beneath plastic tinsel and forgotten intentions. I walked to the mantel where the cropped version had been displayed in a new minimalist frame. I didn't ask. I didn't wait. I simply lifted it, replaced it with the original, and walked away. Let them decide what that meant. Let them feel the quiet weight of it every time they passed. They could argue about curtains and appraisals all they wanted. But that photo? That was mine. Lena found me on the back deck later. We didn't speak for a while. Just stood side by side, watching the sky settle into dusk. She nudged me. They're not going to like that. They never did, I said. She smiled. Not out of joy, but because I'd finally said it out loud. In the distance, I could hear Kate telling someone on the phone that he's acting weird. That he's just bitter. I didn't respond. Didn't give them a scene. Because silence speaks louder when it's deliberate. Aaron found me in the garage. He walked in like he owned the place, flicking the overhead light on with the back of his hand, casting long shadows across the dust-covered workbench. Didn't think you'd actually come back. His voice carried that casual dismissal I remembered from childhood. The same tone he used when he beat me at board games, when I lost my first job, when Dad picked me to help with a project instead of him. I didn't turn around. Just kept wiping dust from a wooden chisel I hadn't seen in years. One of Dad's. One of the good ones. It's still my home, I said, quietly. He scoffed. You moved out. Built your life somewhere else. It's not like you were calling. You ghosted. I set the tool down. Not with force. Not with anger. Just placed it where it belonged. Then I turned. I didn't ghost. You just stopped talking. He tilted his head. You're being dramatic. Am I? I stepped closer, slow. Do you know when the last group message included me? 3 years ago. You all went to Mom's cabin, remember? Took a group photo. Posted it. He shifted. I started. That wasn't personal. You captioned it, whole family weekend. Silence. The kind that hangs in the rafters. The kind that doesn't move until someone tells the truth. He crossed his arms. Look, we thought you'd moved on. You were busy. City job. Apartment. Always had something going on. We didn't want to bother you. So you erased me? We made decisions. It wasn't malicious. I nodded. Because that's what they always said. It wasn't personal. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't malicious. But it was done anyway. They took the things I helped build, rooms, projects, memories, and parceled them off like estate sales. They turned our father's workbench into a staging area for tagged furniture. They took the photo that proved I existed and cropped me out of it. Not out of hate, but out of indifference. Which stung more? I walked over to the old cabinet Dad had built. The one that stuck when you tried to open the top drawer. It still stuck. I had to wiggle it a little. Nudge the left corner. And there it was. My initials, carved beneath the lip in shaky lines. A mistake Dad had let me make when I was 8. Still there. Still mine. Aaron stayed near the doorway, like he didn't want to breathe too much air in the room. Look, he finally said, Clarine's drawing up the contracts. We've got a serious offer. It's cleaner if you don't get involved. I looked over my shoulder. Cleaner. You're not on the deed. You moved out before Dad passed. Mom already signed off. Legally, this isn't yours. He said it like he'd rehearsed it. Like he wanted me to absorb it quietly. And I did. I nodded once. Let it settle. Didn't argue. Didn't yell. Just said, got it. And walked past him without another word. Because if they were going to treat me like a ghost, I'd show them how dangerous ghosts could be. Lena's daughter was sitting cross-legged on the floor in the old sunroom, playing with a cracked tablet. The light from the window cut across the carpet in golden stripes, the way it used to when we were kids, back when this room was filled with puzzles and sleeping bags and the smell of Mom's overwatered ferns. Now it was mostly empty, just a folding chair, a dusty side table, and a child who didn't recognize me. She looked up as I stepped in. Blinked. Are you here for the open house? She asked, cheerful, practiced. I hesitated. Lena came in behind me just as I crouched near her daughter. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Sage, this is your uncle. Sage furrowed her brow. Uncle? Yes, my brother. The girl tilted her head. You have a brother? Lena's face didn't move. Not a flicker. Not even embarrassment. She just said, he lives far away. I stood up. Slowly. Sage returned to her tablet, tapping through a game, unfazed by my presence, my name, my bloodline. Just a stranger passing through. And I knew then, they hadn't just removed me from the photo. They'd removed me from memory. Back in the hallway, Lena followed. She's young. Don't take it personally. She knows Aaron. She knows Kate. They're around more. It's just exposure. You never told her my name? She paused. I didn't think it mattered. That was it. That sentence. That one quiet confession that told me everything I needed to know. They hadn't said I was dead, but they treated me like I never existed. In the dining room, I watched Aaron laugh at something Kate whispered into her glass. They looked so proud of themselves. So comfortable. As if the house had already changed hands. As if this moment, this erasure, was justified. And maybe to them, it was. I hadn't fought. Hadn't inserted myself into family drama. Hadn't played the game. So they took that silence as permission. A blank space where I should have screamed. But I didn't. And I wouldn't. Because silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. That night, I stayed in a motel off Route 17. The room smelled like cheap soap and pine cleaner. I didn't unpack. Just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. No new messages. No missed calls. Nothing from Kate. Nothing from Aaron. Nothing from Lena. No one wondering where I'd gone. Because in their minds, I was already gone. In the drawer next to the motel bed was a brochure. Clarine Realty selling homes. Building futures. There was a number scrawled in pen on the back. Call by Friday if interested. Serious inquiries only. And that's when I knew what I'd do. The attic stairs still creaked. I waited until the house was empty. Kate and Aaron had left to meet Clarine, and Lena had taken Sage to her gymnastics class. No one said goodbye. No one noticed I was still there. Perfect. I closed the hallway door behind me and pulled the attic cord down gently. Dust rained like confetti, floating in lazy spirals through the air. I climbed the narrow steps slowly, the way Dad used to, foot by foot, quiet and careful, not because of the wood, but because of what was waiting at the top. The attic wasn't listed in the open house guide, probably because no one had dared touch it. Inside, it was exactly as I remembered. Old Christmas boxes stacked against the far wall, a yellowed mattress leaning on its side, the vintage lamp from Grandpa's house that never worked, and in the corner, my father's trunk. Navy blue, steel clasps, his initials carved into the lid like a secret only he and I shared. I knelt in front of it. It wasn't locked. It never had been. He once told me, if they're family, they'll never need a key. If they're not, a lock won't stop them. Inside were scraps of our lives, his leather-bound planner from the 90s, ticket stubs from our first baseball game, the letter I wrote him in 7th grade apologizing for crashing his truck into the fence. And under all that, a folder. A thick, beat-up folder with my name written across the front in Dad's handwriting. I froze. No one had ever mentioned this. Not once. Not when he died. Not at the funeral. Not during the will reading, where my name was barely acknowledged. I sat down cross-legged on the wooden floor and opened it. Inside were documents. Bank statements. Shareholder agreements. A letter from Dad's lawyer dated 2 years before he passed. And a note, scrawled in pen, rough and fast like he'd written it in a rush. If they shut you out, don't beg to be let in. Take the back door. I left it open for you. Attached to the letter was a notarized amendment. An ownership clause. One that tied his business trust, Lockridge Tools, the small family company he started, to a silent beneficiary. Me. Not them. Not the siblings. Me. And according to the paperwork, if the house sale ever overlapped with the company's assets, which it did, thanks to a joint collateral agreement Clarine clearly hadn't uncovered, I had legal standing. Not just sentiment. Legal. I leaned back against the attic wall and laughed once. Quietly. Not bitter. Not triumphant. Just relieved. Because I didn't need to yell. Didn't need to plead. I just needed to be patient. The attic had never mattered to them. That was their mistake. I took photos of every page. Every signature. Every clause. Then I slid the folder back where I found it. Careful. Deliberate. I wouldn't remove it. I didn't need to. Because soon, they'd know what I'd always known. This house was built on more than walls and wood. It was built on silence. And I'd been listening. Clarine met me on a Tuesday. She didn't know who I was at first. Just a man in a gray sweater, standing by the mailbox while she stepped out of her spotless Lexus in beige heels and a clipboard that said Final Staging Checklist. Her smile was automatic, polished. Hi there. If you're here for the showing, we'll begin in just a moment. I'm not here to see the house, I said. She blinked, the smile pausing at the corners of her mouth. Oh, I'm here to talk about the documents you didn't request. She frowned. I'm sorry. And you are? I gave her my full name. Her eyes flicked. Recognition didn't dawn slowly, it slammed. You could see it in her pupils, the way the clipboard lowered slightly, the way she pivoted her weight as if standing too firmly might commit her to something. You're their brother? The silent one, I replied. Apparently. She opened her mouth, probably to say something about not getting involved in family matters, but I handed her the folder before she could speak. You didn't pull the business overlays. You assumed the deed stood alone. It doesn't. She flipped open the top page. I watched her throat tighten as her eyes scanned clause after clause, each paragraph more incriminating than the last. This isn't in the file I received. I know. Because they didn't know it existed. She turned one page, then another. And when she hit the notarized amendment from Dad's lawyer, his signature right there in blue ink, she froze. Is this real? Stamped. Filed. Buried under attic insulation. She looked up, voice lower now. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm not here to argue with them. I tapped the paper. I'm here to inform you that if this house sells, you're liable. The trust supersedes the listing. Clarine's breath left her body slowly. They said everything was clear. They said you left. I smiled. Not wide. Just enough. They're good at saying things. That evening, I received the email. Subject: urgent, clarification needed before proceeding with sale. It was from Clarine. Attached were draft withdrawal forms, a paused staging request, and a request to open further dialogue with all listed parties. I didn't reply. Not yet. Let the silence do its job. The next morning, Kate called. First time in almost 4 years. I let it ring. Then Aaron. Same ringtone. Same decision. They didn't leave voicemails. Just rang once, twice, like they weren't even sure what they'd say. I stared at the ceiling of the motel room, the folder still on the table beside me. They thought I'd shout. They thought I'd come begging. But I'd brought a pen instead of a protest. And now the silence was theirs to sit in. They didn't want to meet. But they had no choice. The house was frozen. The sale paused. Clarine had backed off completely, citing a need for legal clarity and declining to show the property further until all outstanding ownership matters are resolved. Translation: you missed something. And someone else has the power now. They chose Kate's living room. Neutral ground, or so they claimed. I arrived last, deliberately. Walked in without knocking. The door was already unlocked, probably from Lena pacing in and out. Aaron sat with his arms crossed on the far side of the room, legs spread like a man preparing for confrontation. Kate hovered near the window, half-chewed nail polish on her thumb. Lena had her daughter on an iPad in the other room, the sound muted. No one offered me a seat. So I stood. Kate was the first to speak. We didn't know about the paperwork. I believe that. Aaron scoffed. You could have just talked to us. When? I looked at him. Before or after you deleted me from the family group chat? Or maybe after you tagged me out of the family tree on Facebook? He didn't answer. Because there wasn't one. Kate stepped forward, arms out like she was controlling the temperature. This doesn't have to be hostile. We can split the value, figure something out. You've already divided everything, I said. You just didn't think I'd notice. Lena spoke then, quietly. So what do you want? Not angry. Just tired. And for the first time in years, I answered honestly. Nothing. They looked at me like I was insane. Kate's eyebrows furrowed. Nothing? I'm not here to take a bigger cut. Or sell it myself. Or fight. I let it breathe. Then continued. I'm just here so you know. I was never gone. You made me invisible. And I let you. I let you cut me out of photos and holidays and birthdays. I let you build a story where I didn't matter because I thought staying quiet meant keeping peace. I looked directly at Aaron. But silence isn't peace. It's just space for people to lie louder. Kate sat down. Slowly. Like the air had thickened around her. Aaron stood, shaking his head, pacing now. This is dramatic. You're weaponizing Dad's will like it's a game. No. I met his eyes. You're just upset I knew something you didn't. Lena didn't speak again. She just looked down at her hands. And I saw something in her face I hadn't seen in years: recognition. Of what they'd done. Of what they'd allowed. I walked to the door. Stopped with my hand on the knob. It's not about the house. I looked over my shoulder. It's about being treated like I was never there. And now you'll sit with that. Then I left. No dramatic exit. No shouting. No slamming of doors. Just the soft click of it closing behind me. And silence. The kind that lingers. The next day, I met with the lawyer Dad had used before he died. Not mine. Not anyone knew. His. Mr. Carlton had a handshake like a worn leather glove and a voice like a weather report, low, steady, not given to storms. He remembered me right away. You're the one who fixed the shingles after the ice storm, right? He smiled faintly. Your dad said you were the only one who didn't complain. I nodded. I remembered that storm. I remembered Aaron refusing to get on the ladder. Kate saying she had a brunch. And me, cold hands and sore shoulders, never asking for anything back. Mr. Carlton laid out the options. The business trust, now active. The silent clause in the property lien. And the part they hadn't read. My right to halt or amend any real estate transaction involving inherited equity. They had built their plan like a house of cards, carefully, delicately, but without checking the foundation. They had sold a future that wasn't fully theirs. And now they needed my signature. Not for profit. For permission. That afternoon, I sent them a message. Not a call. Not a group text. Just a single email with a PDF attached. Subject line. Offer. The document was brief. 3 paragraphs. Direct. I wouldn't block the sale. I wouldn't take the house. But I wanted one thing in return. The attic. Ownership. Legally. Fully. The structure, the contents, and a clause that would let me seal it from public access for as long as I wished. They could sell the house. But not that part. Not the part they never touched. Kate replied in under 10 minutes. What kind of stunt is this? Aaron replied 5 minutes later. You're messing with us over junk? But Lena didn't reply. She called. Why the attic? She asked. I could hear her confusion, but beneath it, something else. Regret, maybe. Or guilt she hadn't chosen to carry until now. Because it's the only part of this house you didn't touch. I paused. The only part that still feels like him. And me. She said nothing for a long time. Then finally. I'll talk to them. They signed the addendum that night. A single-page contract drawn up by Carlton's office. Filed. Stamped. Irrevocable. The attic was mine. And that was all I needed. 2 days later, the house went into escrow. The for sale sign still stood on the lawn, but now with a red slash across it. Pending. I didn't visit again. Didn't walk through the rooms one last time. Didn't ask where the furniture went. Didn't care. Because I had what they never understood. Not nostalgia. Not revenge. But something far simpler. Proof that I was here. The new owners wouldn't get a key to the attic. That was part of the agreement. Clarine had protested at first. It's highly unusual. Buyers don't want uncertainty. But after she saw the notarized clause and the buyer's final signature, she stepped back like it burned her fingers. The buyers never even asked. People like that didn't ask questions about sealed doors. They assumed the mystery belonged to someone else. On the final day, I returned. One last time. Not to walk through the rooms, they had already been staged for photos, stripped of anything that made them real. But to stand in that attic one more time, alone. The sun had lowered by the time I pulled the stairs down. They still creaked. Upstairs, the air was thick with heat and dust and the silence of things that had never been spoken aloud. Everything was exactly where I left it. Dad's trunk. The crate of tools. My carved initials. I sat down beside the window, on the old wooden bench no one else remembered. It still wobbled slightly if you leaned too far left. I leaned anyway. Let the room hold me. I didn't need the house. Not really. They could have the kitchen tile they fought over. The hallway where we measured our heights and pencil marks they painted over. They could keep the fireplace and the dining room and the crown molding they'd posted about on Zillow. I didn't care about the walls. I cared about what was never erased. The attic wasn't storage. It was proof that someone had remembered me, that someone had planned for this. I left one thing behind before I sealed it. A letter, addressed to no one, just placed in the center of the floor, on top of Dad's folded work apron. It read, If you're reading this, it means you had the keys but not the history. This room isn't haunted, but it remembers. It remembers who climbed these stairs, who knelt in the dust, who wasn't invited, but came anyway, and who stayed long after the door closed. I folded it once. No signature. Some stories don't need authors. I closed the trunk, stood up, ran my hand along the slanted beam where Dad once wrote measurements in pencil. Then I sealed the attic door, locked it, and left. They would live in that house. They would repaint, remodel, restyle. But there would always be one door they couldn't open, and that was enough. Not because it kept them out, but because it let me in. The silence changed them. Not right away. Not in the loud, crashing way they expected stories like this to end. There were no lawsuits. No shouting matches in courtrooms. No final family dinner where everything was forgiven over half-finished wine. There was just space. Wide, cold, untouchable space. Kate sent a message 2 weeks later. Just one line. I didn't know he'd saved all that. I didn't reply. Because she didn't mean the documents. She meant the proof. The box. The letters. The name scratched into it. The evidence that someone had paid attention when she hadn't. That Dad had left a map, and I had followed it. And they hadn't even known a path existed. Lena called, late at night. I watched the phone ring 4 times. Let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave one. But her number saved as "used to be home" flashed across my screen, and I stared at it longer than I meant to. The truth was, I didn't hate her. Not really. I just stopped needing her to remember me. Aaron? He never called. He wouldn't. That was his talent, conviction without question. Until the silence started cornering him. It came from other places. Their friends. Their coworkers. People asking, so what happened with the house? Heard someone else had rights to it? Weren't there legal issues with the sale? Nothing malicious. Just curious. But it was enough. Because people don't fear shame when it's loud. They fear it when it's quiet. When it slips into conversations. Into glances. Into questions they can't answer without choking on their version of the truth. I didn't say a word publicly. No press release. No social post. No long letter explaining my side. Because that would have given them a story to argue with. Instead, I gave them silence. The kind that shapes perception without ever being named. The kind that leaves people asking questions instead of giving them answers. The attic stayed closed. I visited it once more. Quietly. The family had moved out. The new owners had begun painting the bedrooms. They never touched the attic. Didn't even mention it. They respected the clause. Some part of them must have known that space wasn't meant to be theirs. Some spaces never are. I sat on the bench again. This time with nothing in my hands. No folder. No plan. Just the weight of everything they'd tried to erase and failed. Because you can remove someone from a table. You can crop them out of photos. You can forget their birthday and uninvite them to the holidays. But if they were ever truly there, the silence will remember. They still held the family dinner. Same date. Same rented hall. The annual remember when tradition they claimed was sacred. But this time, I wasn't invited. Not by mistake. Not as a miscommunication. This time, no one forgot to call. They just didn't. I saw the photos on Kate's social feed the next morning. The same white tablecloths. The same clinking glasses. Aaron in a crisp blazer, standing at the end of the table like he was leading a board meeting instead of slicing roast beef. Lena was in a pale blue dress, sitting close to the center. Sage had grown taller. She was holding a glass of ginger ale, lifting it mid-toast like she understood the choreography now. They looked polished. Structured. Perfect. Except the table had a gap. A single empty chair near the far edge. Barely noticeable to anyone outside the frame. But I noticed. Not because of the chair. But because they hadn't filled it. It was tradition to cram in extra seats. To make room. Even when there wasn't any. But this time, they left it blank. And that silence, right there beside them, said more than any caption. I got a call from Clarine 3 days later. She wasn't asking for business. She was asking for dinner. A personal conversation, she said. A new opportunity. A referral. Some small property investment. But I heard it in her voice. That pause between words. The way she said my name now. Measured. Respectful. Like someone reciting a name that had begun showing up in conversations she wasn't part of. They were learning. You can't bury someone just because they went quiet. Because silence isn't death. It's discipline. I went to the diner instead. The one Dad used to take me to when he needed a break from everything. They'd changed the booths but not the clocks. I sat by the window. Ordered a coffee. Let the hum of other people's lives drift past me. On the napkin, I wrote a sentence that had been circling my thoughts for days. They kept the table full, but the space louder. I folded the napkin. Tucked it into my wallet. Not because I needed to remember, but because they did. Back at the motel, I found a letter in my inbox. From Sage. Typed. Simple. Mom says you were here before I was born. That you helped hang the porch lights and fix the mailbox. Is that true? I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. Because she'd asked. And that alone meant something had shifted. It arrived folded, creased from years of hiding. Not in an envelope. Just paper, hand torn at the edges, slipped into a library book Sage had checked out from the local branch, tucked between chapters on constellations and forgotten moons. She messaged me a photo of it. No subject, no context, just the letter, and this line typed below it. Did you write this? I hadn't, but I recognized the handwriting. Dad's. The capital LS curved like coat hooks. The ink was faded, but the words hadn't softened. If they ever make him feel like less, remind him who built the stairs they stand on. Sage hadn't meant to find it, but maybe it had meant to find her. I called the library, asked how old the book was. They told me it had been donated by the Lockridge family after the estate closed out. Kate, probably. Or Lena, trying to get rid of the last pieces that held my name. And in doing so, they left behind one thing they didn't know was there. One thing they couldn't scrub. Sage met me 2 days later. We sat on a bench in the park, her with a tea, me with nothing but my hands in my lap. She didn't say much, just handed me the letter again. I held it, traced the edges, and looked up at her. He wrote this for you? She asked. I shook my head. No. I folded it gently. He wrote it for himself. There was silence between us, but not the empty kind. Not the kind that stings. This one breathed. I used to think you left, she said. I nodded. I let her say it. Let her feel it out loud. That you didn't want to be around us. Around me. I didn't answer. Didn't correct. Because what mattered wasn't the past. It was what she believed now. And when she looked back at me, there was no blame in her eyes. Just recognition. Like she'd finally stopped hearing someone else's version. I want to know more, she said. I smiled softly. Then ask anything you like. We sat there for another hour, talking about the old porch swing. The time I taught her how to fix a flat tire. The painting she made in 2nd grade that I'd kept, folded in my journal for years. And then she asked one last question before we parted. Do you miss it? I paused, looked at the trees around us. The open sky. The freedom. No, I said. I don't miss being where I was tolerated. She nodded, and left with the letter in her hand, folded like something sacred. I didn't leave a message. No letter. No grand statement tucked into a drawer or slipped under a door. I didn't owe them that. The goodbye had already happened, just not the way they imagined. Not with tears. Not with a hug on the front porch or a half-hearted apology over coffee. No. The real goodbye had been happening for years. Each time they erased my name from a group invite. Each time they answered for me in family conversations like I wasn't there. Each time they rewrote the story without me in it. I just walked away. From the motel room I no longer needed. From the town that had tried to hold my silence in its teeth. From the dinner tables where my name once sat like a placeholder no one wanted to fill. Sage was the only one who met me at the curb. She handed me a small envelope, handwritten, sealed in gold. I nodded, took it, slipped it in my pocket. You sure you're not coming back? She asked. I smiled. I never really left. I just stopped waiting for them to notice. She didn't try to argue. She just stood there, her arms crossed against the wind, her chin lifted. You know, they still don't get it, she said. They don't have to. I opened the car door, slid behind the wheel. She tapped once on the roof before I pulled off, and I didn't look back. On the road out of town, I opened her envelope at a red light. Inside was a photo. Me and Sage, 5 years old, covered in paint from a garage project that never got finished. Written on the back. Some things never washed off. By dusk, I passed the edge of county lines. The radio silent. The road long and clean. No texts. No missed calls. Just the echo of names I no longer carried. I stopped once more before midnight. At a rest stop overlooking a lake. I sat on the hood of the car, jacket zipped, hands loose. Above me, the sky stretched wide and empty. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small inside it. Didn't feel forgotten. Didn't feel invisible. They hadn't changed. But I had. And sometimes that's enough. Not revenge. Not justice. Just clarity. I tossed the last photo I'd kept of the family into the water. Not to erase it, but to let it live somewhere I didn't have to carry it anymore. The ripples swallowed it whole. And that was the end of it. No applause. No thunder. No final confrontation. Just a man, his silence, and the road ahead. Exactly as it should be.